Hello, and welcome to a special Wrasslecast, aka the LegendsCast. I'm your host, Don Delarente, and I'm joined today by a co-host from the at Go Get Over podcast, none other than Joey Powell.
What's up, Don? Thanks for having me, bud.
Hey man, I'm glad you could join me today. Glad you could join me today. And I'm also joined by a special guest. You can find him on Twitter. He's known for putting out awesome history. He has the ring posters of the matches, none other than Seth Hansen.
Hey,
Nice to meet you, Seth. Nice to have you on today.
glad to be here.
All right.
Love talking history of wrestling.
Yeah. Today we're going to get into the careers of two gentlemen who recently just passed away, get a little bit more in depth on the careers of George the Animal Steel and Ivan Koloff. Both two legends in their own right. A lot of us have memories of them in their later years as they were wrapping up their careers. But today we kind of just want to talk about their whole career, their early days, how both men got started out, and some of their legendary matches maybe before we got introduced to them in the 80s. So we'll start with George Animal Steel. He was born Jim Myers. He was born in Detroit, and he was raised in Michigan his whole life. He played various sports: track, baseball, basketball, football. He actually went to Michigan State as a football player, but he was cut short, of course, as most guys back in those days when they had knee problems. It was basically the end of their playing days. And so he was basically a guy who went into coaching and teaching. He started to become a teacher, a high school teacher, and on the side, he started delving into wrestling. He started his first gimmick, as it would be, under a mask, and he was called the Student. So that turned into him looking for a bigger name and a bigger stage. So he borrowed the name of an actual gentleman that was on his coaching staff, George Steele, and he asked him if he could use the name. George, the original George Steele, said he didn't have a problem with that, and so that became his wrestling name. And then he took off the mask and became, started cutting interviews and went to the WWF of Vince McMahon Sr. So, Seth, I'll let you kind of jump in from there and just kind of talk about George Steele in his early days before he became the animal that we knew in the 80s, eating the turnbuckles and whatnot.
George Steele was not really a cartoon character back in the 60s. He was more of a serious heel that was seen as a serious threat to the likes of Bruno. And he was, obviously this is before my time, but he was a bankable heel. I mean, and even he had he was like a crazy madman, and people were amazed. I mean, and I think that if people could have seen him in the 60s or even in the 70s, they'd be amazed at how different he was. He was more of a evil, crazy heel.
More than the likable.
More than the lovable, cuddly George Steele that you saw in the 80s with, Miss Elizabeth. And
Right. He actually started off working with Bruno when he went to WWF. And so that basically made, like you said, that made him a credible name right off the bat. And they went around the loop and drew lots of money, of course. And then, like you said, if you kind of fast forward into the 80s and the rock and wrestling era, he was more famous in that era with our generation. So, Joey, I'll kind of let you jump in here and kind of what were your earliest memories of George the Animal Steel? in that era of the WWF in general.
Yeah, I mean the rock and wrestling era, like you said, I think that was extremely entertaining. It was because it was all geared towards kids. You know, you got a guy with the green tongue. He's coming out. He's very aloof. He's kind of like what eventually would become Shrek. You know, the kind of the Disney character. I think it's Disney, but he just he was a lot like kind of the precursor to Shrek, and really really hairy shoulders, but he was just a fan favorite, and I think it was because he was so aloof, and he was very I don't know, he played to that part of your emotion that wants to show empathy for folks that may have a mental disability, because that's kind of was what his character was. He played a little bit of a guy that was a little slow, and you know, just the whole eating the turnbuckle antics and the green tongue. It made him somewhat of a like you guys said earlier, he was kind of a caricature. But those were my first memories of him. Obviously, with the stuff that he did with Elizabeth later on, kind of having the hots for her. I think that was a pretty memorable angle. But that was the first thing I remember about him. And you know, in at least in the '80s, he was never a top guy. He was always kind of a lower mid card guy. But again, he was entertaining, and kids loved him, and that's who the market was at that time. It was, you know, or at least the WWF product. It was very very kid friendly.
Right. Yeah. Same thing with me. Same era. I mean, you, Joe, I know we're very close in age. Yeah, he was definitely one of the most popular guys in WWF growing up in my young days. Right there was Roddy Piper, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man. Like you said, such a big part of the Ricky Steamboat Macho Man match and that whole build, him leading up to, you know, having the hots for Miss Elizabeth and giving the interviews, and Miss Elizabeth always sticking up for him and talking about how nice of a man he was and everything like that, putting him over. So just a real big part of that building block that Vince built back in the 80s.
You know, and he had the stuffed animal that he carried to the ring. I remember that too.
Right.
Mine, yeah. I couldn't remember his name, but yeah, he carried a stuffed animal to the ring. So I mean, he was very much a lovable, huggable, you know, whatever you want to call it, type character. And it's weird. He was kind of like he was kind of part Al Snow, and maybe part Bailey, just because he's, you know, just so friendly and always licking people on the head. Wasn't that his thing too? Didn't he always lick people?
And a little bit of Eugene too, I think.
A little bit of Eugene, yeah. I'd say he was a great precursor to Eugene.
Yeah, so I just think that a lot of people just, you know, like we said, we don't get a chance to, and a lot of that stuff is not documented. Seth was talking about when he was, you know, a scarier type of guy, like, you know, hide your kids, don't let them get close to George Steele type days. And I think that's the type of thing for wrestling nowadays that's lost, just to see that real heat that people had, and to see it, you know, on video through the fans of those days, when they believed and everything was made to make them believe. They might not have thought everything was real, but they knew the guys were real, at least the bad guys anyway. And, you know.
And I think one of the things that made him so intriguing, both as a heel, you know, when he was a lunatic, and then when he turned, was that he never said a lot, right? Even when he talked, he was a man of very few words. And I think that mystique is what kept, you know, kind of kept his character intriguing, no matter what, because he never gave you too much. You know, you could always buy him either way.
Seth, I'm gonna bring you back in. One of the most memorable things that ever happened on Saturday night's main event was when the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov turned on George Animal Steel, and it kind of was the precursor, which led into the whole thing with Ricky Steamboat, as they were wrestling Ricky Steamboat and the U.S. Express, Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda at the time. And then he got with Captain Lou Albano, and, you know, it kind of went from there. So do you have any memories of that particular time?
I haven't seen that particular Saturday night main event, so I can't. So I can't talk about that one, but
That's definitely one of the first ones that I can ever remember. The first one that ever came on that I can remember seeing, because WWF wasn't a regular staple here in North Carolina unless you had cable. That's the only time that you ever got to see WWF.
that was a couple of years before I started watching.
Oh, really?
I didn't start till around probably late '87.
Okay. Good times. Good times. So we'll transition from George the Animal Steel to a guy who I know I definitely was definitely honored to meet this past summer. None other than the Russian Bear, Ivan Koloff. He unfortunately passed away a week after George the Animal Steel. Ivan Koloff was actually Canadian. He was born, his real name is Orel Perel. He had a gimmick as an Irish wrestler when he first started out in Canada, and then he became the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff and debuted in the WWF as well. He's most famous for, of course, his 21-day championship reign as the champion when he defeated Bruno Sammartino. He ended the 8-year run of Bruno, in which he made the garden fall silent because the people were in shock and amazement. He would end up losing the title to Pedro Morales, but he will always go down his history as the man who defeated Bruno Sammartino. He then moved on from his WWF days into the Crockett promotion, NWA, Charlotte, where he was multiple time World Tag Team Champion, 6-man Tag Team Champion, U.S. Title Tag Team Champion. So just a story career, a person that I watched my whole life growing up. Definitely respected him and knew that Ivan Koloff was no joke. And whenever he was coming to fight or wrestle a jobber, that it was going to be a long day for that jobber. So Joey, I know that me and you both grew up here in North Carolina. Ivan Koloff was such a big part of our childhood growing up. I'll let you start with kind of your memories of Ivan and his career.
Man, what a scary character he had on screen. And the funny thing was that we actually talked about this on our episode yesterday. We spent some time obviously paying tribute to Ivan and what a great career he had. I think he's it's as much as a guy that once held the heavyweight title could be unheralded. I think Ivan's career, he was mostly unheralded. But my first impressions of him, were just how freaking scary he was, with Nikita in the 80s, working for Crockett and Mid-South. I think it's ironic, though, if you go back and look at his career, that there was a lot of, I don't know if there were actual intersections, but there was a lot of similarities between his career and George Steele's career, in that, they both had a lot of involvement with Bruno. They were both managed by Lou Albano at one point, kind of close to the same time, I believe. But I think one of the biggest things about Ivan, especially as unheralded as he was, because he never was, he wasn't like the big muscular guy, but he could work his tail off, and he was so good on the mic. We ran an episode, or we ran a promo back that he did with Nikita back in the 80s, and I can't remember what it was for, but
Sounded like Joey cut out on us for a second. Seth, you can go ahead and jump in, and we'll see if we can get Joey.
Okay. Well, I was just, there's footage, but I wish we had a better footage of the night Ivan Koloff won the title, because, I mean, you talk about a stunned audience. I would love to have been in that audience, because the closest thing that we've ever seen to that in modern era was, of course, when Undertaker lost at WrestleMania. But it just, the crowd never thought that Bruno was going to lose. Here's a guy that had held the belt for so many years and was he still is larger than life guy. And here's Ivan Koloff, who, in my opinion, is the greatest Russian heel. He wins the title, and people are having heart attacks, and they just sat in silence. When you get the entire Madison Square Garden silent like that, it's just what a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And Ivan Koloff has never really gotten, in my opinion, he's never really gotten quite the love that he should. Here's a guy that just, like you said, worked his butt off in the ring, and both in the WWF and Crockett Promotions, I would consider him one of the better workers of that era.
Oh, definitely.
And to Ivan is he could do it all. He could work, he could talk, and I think that it's really a shame that he didn't get to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame while he was alive.
Yeah, big oversight that a lot of people are starting to recognize, as a lot of people just assumed that he was in, considering the storied career that he had. Joey, I'll let you get back in and finish your thoughts.
Yeah, where'd you lose me?
You were just going into how he could work and how he could talk, and how he kind of getting into his career and how underappreciated he might have been.
Yeah, unheralded is probably the word that I just take away from it. Seth made the great point about what a great worker he was, and he really was. The guy was a phenomenal worker. Dropped a knee better than just about anybody I ever remember in the business. Could get over a lot of different ways, but just he was so good as a mic man, which is, I think, if Nikita Koloff is being honest about it, that's what got him over, was Ivan's ability to talk for those two, because Nikita couldn't. And he kind of made Nikita's career. Guy held the big belt for Vince Senior, and it's just if you can be unheralded as a world champ, then I would have to say that, especially since he's not in the Hall of Fame yet, that Ivan Koloff's career was one that was quite unheralded.
Right.
But I definitely have a huge appreciation for him, and I know we mentioned this too. I know he did a lot for the Children's Miracle Network later in his career. He was very active as a minister. Gave his testimony to a lot of different groups of folks long after his career. Just, he was the polar opposite in real life of what he was on the screen, which I think is not only a testament to him, to his character as a person, but also to how good of a heel he could be.
Right. And that's the art of the profession. Once it's
absolutely
all just to kind of tie up a little bit. Ivan Koloff wrestled all our favorites. I mean, he wrestled Dusty Rhodes, he wrestled the Road Warriors when they were the 6-man tag team champions. They had lots of battles. He wrestled Magnum TA a lot when Magnum was first coming in for the U.S. title. They, first time I saw the Rock and Roll Express, it was against Ivan and for the tag team titles. So just so many big moments he was a part of growing up, and like you said, legitimized Nikita Koloff for sure by their talking and being able to act as his manager almost in a way, and his teacher and his mentor. And Nikita is just one of the best draws and best heels of the time. Indestructible for 1985-86 when Nikita Koloff was coming to your arena. I mean, it wasn't going to be a very long match, and you were going to be very impressed.
And man, did they do some business. Good gosh, did they do some business. I mean, you mentioned how he worked the top of the card. He and Nikita with so many different guys, and they were hated. They were absolutely hated.
Right. And it's funny that, they always talk about how, the things of wrestling, it's always a parody or parallel to the society.
Yeah.
And, just as we fast forward now to what's going on in our news and how much Russia is in our news now, it was tenfold during those days, because there was like a serious threat, and those guys in wrestling posed that serious threat as well.
They were it, man. They personified it.
Exactly. Just one more thing about George Steele that was pretty cool is he was also had some things in entertainment where he was in Ed Wood, where he got to portray Tor, a real life wrestler and educator in Ed Wood. And he remember the show Learning the Ropes, Joey? It used to come on after NWA Saturday mornings with
Oh my
Lala.
God. Yes. What did they make, like 10 episodes of that, and that was it?
Right, right. That was based on George Animal Steele's life.
I did not know that. Well done.
Yeah, yeah, the school teacher. Yeah, that I used to love that show for the like you said, month and a half that it was on. So, Seth, I just want to get with you about where do you get those cool old school ring posters from with all those cards and some of those great matches?
A variety of sources. Some of them I get off of newspaper archive sites. Some I've gotten from old fan newsletters of the day. There's great, if you can find them. The TNT Times is just a great old newsletter from the late 70s, early 80s by Terry Justice. It's nothing but like clippings of the day. It's really
Yeah,
there's so many great clippings that I pulled from there. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it because the Twitter feed is growing by the day. I love the history of the wrestling business, and so yeah, I get them from different sources, but I'm always on the lookout. I always am finding more of them.
right. You put one up the other day that was intriguing. It had Dusty Rhodes versus Billy Robinson. And I was like, wow, that would be an interesting match to see.
Oh yeah, that'd be good. That'd be Billy Robinson was just an awesome worker.
Yes, yes. There's an awesome match. It's about 45 minutes of Nick Botwinkle and Billy Robinson just putting each other in and out of holes. It's fantastic. So, what we're watching, if you guys want to check out something old school by Billy Robinson, just one of the most underrated pure wrestlers that there's ever been. Very entertaining guy. So, just in wrapping up, we'll let you guys get your final comments in on the two legends we talked about today. Also, let everybody know where they can follow you on Twitter, and Joey, let everybody know where they can follow your podcast and get in touch with you guys.
Yeah,
So,
it's
Joey,
the. I'm sorry, I thought you were thought it was a setup.
Go ahead, you are set up.
Yeah, it's the Go Get Over podcast. GOGETOVER. That's where you can find us on Twitter. Get the podcast on iTunes or on the web at WRALSportsfan.com. Chris Morris, my co-host, and I, we try to put an episode out once a week, and hope you guys will go check it out.
All right. And Seth, let everybody know where they can follow you on Twitter.
You can find me over on Twitter at Seth Hansen 1982. I post daily this day in history type stuff almost every day. So come check it out. I think you'll. There's a lot of different great territory era cards that I think you can spend hours looking at that stuff. It's a lot of fun.
Yes, yes, definitely. There's at least one or two a week that catch my interest, and you see some matches and just be like, man, I wish I could have been in the crowd that particular day to see this particular match.
I'm the same way all the time.
And of course, I'm Don Delarente, and you can listen to the Wrasslecast and follow the Wrasslecast at the Wrasslecast on Twitter. Download us at www.cspn.us, and also visit our Tumblr page at wrasslecast.tumblr.com. So for my guests today, Joey and Seth Hansen, I'm Don Delarente. Thank you guys for joining us for this special Wrasslecast edition on the life and times of George Animal Steele and Ivan Koloff.
All right.